welcome back to our podcast. I'm the Disturbed Southern Belle.
And I'm the gentleman.
This week we're going to be covering some ghost and haunted sites that are in Alabama. That's where we're from, so we thought we would kick it off with covering some from there. We're going to cover several. The first one that we're going to cover is called the Constellation Church. This church is nestled deep in the woods near Butler County and Covington County. It is in Red Level, Alabama. And there's been a lot of things that have been seen there over the years. Nothing has ever been really substantiated. There have been some people who went out there to actually investigate it, and no one has ever been able to do that. But some of the things that people have said that they have seen over the years there are stories of banshees, hellhounds, ghosts, ghost riders, and even an haunted outhouse at the church. So one of the most common legends shared about the church is that there's this banshee, that they can hear shrieking, sobbing, and even whimpering through the wooden walls of the church. And that if you hear it, it signals that someone inside the church would die soon. So needless to say, I'm pretty sure that people are probably not really wanting to hear that banshee hollering if that's what it signals. That doesn't sound right.
Actually, kind of reminds me of La Llorona a little bit.
Right. So another thing that people claim that they see are these hellhounds that have these glowing red eyes, and they're supposed to roam around the cemetery that's located just in front of the church. Also, the cemetery it's really old, dates back to like the 1800s, early 1800s, and it's the final resting place of several men who served in the Confederate Army. And there are people who have said that when they visited the church or visited the cemetery, they could hear the sound of soldiers marching. But that's not the only thing that people have said that they have seen there. There's also supposed to be some children that haunt the property. There's a small boy who plays with a ball, and he sometimes appears to people who visit the church. And sometimes people say they can only hear him laughing. But legend has it that if you feel him, you're going to feel a sudden gust of cold air on you. And then if he has this little ball with him and he rolls it to you and the person picks it up, they're going to die soon.
Well, that's not weird at all.
No, not weird at all. So if you see a little boy at the Constellation Church and he rolls the ball to you, I'd say just let it be. Even if you think it's a real boy, just not take that chance. The second child that's supposed to be haunting the area is a little girl. Now, she just appears and then skips down the road and then disappears again. That's the only sightings anybody's ever had of her. But there's another story that involves a black 1964 Ford pickup truck, and it has a ghost rider. The story goes that if a visitor loiters at the church for too long on the night of a full moon, the truck will appear and chase the visitors away. If the truck catches up with the visitors, their vehicle will crash, killing everyone in the vehicle. So I'm saying
that just immediately got a lot less funny.
It did, and I'm going to say just finally go ahead and just stay away from that church because this does not sound like a good place to be.
Yeah, it seems like a very, very deadly place to be.
Right. Now, last but not least is the old haunted outhouse that sits just a few yards behind the church. Legend has it that if someone enters the outhouse, the door will shut and lock behind them, holding them prisoner until someone from outside opens the door. So I guess if you go out there by yourself and use the outhouse, you're on your own.
Well, you are by yourself, so.
Right. Now, the church isn't there anymore. It did actually burn down in like February of 2015. There haven't really been any major reporting since then, so I don't know if maybe it was all supposed to be linked to the church or what. But as I said, nothing's ever been substantiated about it, but it is very interesting anyway.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so that's the first one we're going to cover. So next we're going to move over to Hartselle, Alabama on KO Road, and we're going to check out the Crybaby Hollow Bridge. Okay, so there's several variants of the story about the bridge, many taking place in different time periods, so I guess there's no real definite story. But one story is a baby is said to have died on the bridge, either in a car or wagon accident or at the hands of someone murderous intent, so that possibly someone, maybe killed the baby or threw it off the bridge. And there's also a version that says that the child was a Native American who was swept away from his or her mother during an intense flood. And motorists now say that they can hear the cries of the baby's spirit as they pass over the bridge, and their cars rattle and shake while they're going across it. Okay, so next we're going to Huntsville, Alabama, and we're going to the Dead Children's Playground, which sounds like such a fun place to look into. But
yep.
Anyway, this playground is supposedly the site children that died in the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, and they were buried in Maple Hill plots that adjoin the playground. And now it's said that spirits of those children come out at dark to play and run around on the playground. And there have been some photos, supposedly, or unexplained shadows and orbs people have seen, but it's another one that's never been, none of these are, definite, foolproof, any of them. I mean, they're all, this is just, people have seen these things. But that's one of the things that people have seen. They've seen like orbs and shadows, and they've heard children laughing, then turn around and they see like swings moving and just stuff.
Standard haunted playground
Right.
stuff.
Exactly. So next, we're going to be looking or talking about the Sloss furnaces, which are located in Birmingham. There's been a lot of reports of all kinds of spooky happenings supposedly happening around these furnaces, that like they've heard people hear voices, the sounds of footsteps, the sound of like heavy metal chains clanging against the furnaces. The temperature will rapidly drop in certain areas, and some even say they've seen a shadowy or glowy figures like following them in the dark. And some have even said that they felt like a push or a shove or something that by someone who wasn't there. So, according to the legend of this, there's one particular time in Sloss's history when nearly 50 workers died in horrific accidents under the reign of a man they call Slag. And although dispute about the existence of Slag is known, he's not supposed to have been James Robert Wormwood, and they say he was like a tyrannical foreman who was brought on board in 1903, and he was in charge of the graveyard shift, and he was abusive to the workers. And the legend says that he forced his men to speed up production to impress the bosses and force them to take dangerous risks, and they say more men died under him as their foreman than any other time in history.
Well, he seems like a great guy.
Yeah. Now, supposedly he fell to his death from the highest glass furnace into a huge mixture of hot molten iron. And now many people, and people now report they hear or see him hanging around the furnaces at night. So I guess he's not done with his
Overwatch.
Overwatch, tyranny, whatever, his reign of terror.
But yeah, I actually do think I've heard that one.
Yeah, that one is actually a pretty famous one. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have probably heard it. It is a pretty well-known one. It's a pretty horrific one, too, if you think about it. But, yeah.
What a way to go.
Exactly. Next, we're going to talk about one of Huntsville's most famous ghost stories, and that is the ghost of Sally Carter. Now, these ghost stories have been told, like the first one was told as early as like 1919. And what was supposed to happen is one night, this boy from Dothan, Alabama, he slept on a cot outside the Carter's former upstairs bedroom, where her bedroom was before she died. And in the night, he dreamed of her. And there was supposed to have been a thunderstorm coming through and whatever. And in this dream, she told the boy to prop up her tombstone, which had fallen during this thunderstorm. So he wakes up the next morning. He supposedly walks out to her gravesite, and when he arrived, he had found that the tombstone had actually fallen over. And so that's how the story begins. There's been more sightings and things like that. People used to, like kids would ride their bikes out there to visit the gravesite kind of as a rite of passage. And people have said they've seen bones laying on the grave and all kinds of stuff. Now, I don't know whether any of that's true, of course, but eventually it got so bad that, people were coming out to visit her grave and stuff so much that they just exhumed the bodies and moved them and didn't tell anybody where they moved to.
Probably smart.
Probably smart, because it was probably like a lot of vandalism and things like that going on. And, but anyway, that's one of the most famous ghosts in Huntsville's history. This next one takes place in Selma, Alabama, and it took place in July of 1854, and it's really a crazy one. It's the disappearance of Orion Williams. So what is supposed to have happened is that basically, he was sitting on the porch with his wife and son rather, and they were kind of, just sitting there watching the horses graze or whatever. And he gets up and is going to go out towards the field to do some farm work or whatever. So he gets up, and his wife says, he picks up a stick that was lying on the ground and was kind of playing with it, and he walked off. And as he's walking towards the field, his neighbors passed by, and they were, in a buggy or whatever, and they saw him, and spoke to him or whatever, and he spoke to them. And then all of a sudden, he just disappears into thin air right in front of them. Just, he's gone.
Well, then, that was interesting.
So, they all run out, and they're looking for him, and his wife and kid or whatever, and it's just grass and land, and like, he had never even been there. So, what happened? No one really knows. The wife ended up fainting and had to be taken to the local hospital. When people found out, what had happened, hundreds, like 300 people gathered and went to the field to look for him. And they carefully searched the entire area. Bloodhounds were even brought out and they tracked, and everything. Hours passed, torches were lit, darkness came, whatever, and they could find no sign of him whatsoever. So the next day, more citizens come in from other communities outside of Selma to help participate in the search. And they went as far as digging into the ground where he was standing, only to find bedrock. And eventually the parties gave up. He was never found, dead or alive.
Well,
So,
interesting story.
very interesting story. I've never in my life heard of someone just literally vaporizing in front of someone, more or less, leaving no trace, no nothing. I mean, you can't even say it was something like spontaneous combustion, because even that would leave some ashes or something. I mean, and you think you would see them, engulf in flames or something happen, but this was like he was just there and then he was just gone. And supposedly the guy was looking at him when it happened. So no one knows what happened to him. So that is definitely a very, very weird one. Next, we're going to head over to Oxford, Alabama, to one of the most haunted bridges in Alabama. And it's known as the Hell's Gates Bridge.
This one I've definitely heard of.
So this legend is pretty famous. So a lot of people probably have heard of this one. It acquired its name because the most popular event to ever take place on it. And this is supposed to be the story. So sometime during like the 1950s, a young couple's car drove over the bridge and into the water below. Now, supposedly nowadays, if you stop your car on the bridge and turn off your lights, a member of the couple will enter your car and leave a wet spot on your seat.
Well, then, that's interesting.
It is. It's very interesting. Also, people believe that if you stop on the bridge and glance over your shoulder, the road behind you resembles the fiery gates of hell. And supposedly that's how it got its name, the Hell's Gate Bridge.
That makes sense.
So, yeah, I don't really know why anybody would want to go over this bridge. But anyway, there's been like a bunch of supposedly encounters and stuff. People went out and investigated it. I don't know if anything's ever been really found or not on any of these. We're just doing them for fun, more or less. But yeah, that's another one that's kind of creepy. But yeah. So the children from Apeville, Alabama, were told a story of someone called Huggin' Molly. And this is another ghost story and this was something that was used to actually also scare children to make them do right. They'd tell them Huggin' Molly was going to get them, and and the kids believed it. So there's different versions of who Huggin' Molly actually was, and they vary. But one frequent description depicts her as a giant of a woman. She's probably 7 foot tall and as big around as a bale of cotton. So she's this huge Amazon woman. And they still say that she still walks the street late at night and she's sweeping her black skirt back and forth as she goes. And if she happens upon you, she'll chase you down, give you a big hug, and scream in your ear. So the kids that grew up there, their parents used to tell them, that Huggin' Molly would get them, and they believed it. And that made the kids not want to be out after dark because everybody was afraid of Huggin' Molly.
Well, why wouldn't you be?
It doesn't sound like she does too much to you other than scream at you, but I guess it would be pretty terrifying to have some gigantic woman just snatch you up off the ground and hug on you. But yeah. So next, we're going to Anniston High School in Anniston, Alabama. And there is supposedly some goings-ons happening in the girls' locker room. So this happens, like I said, in Anniston High School. The locker room. And the legend is told to all the newcoming female freshmen that, go to the lockers to change clothes for PE. They are told, to make sure that they don't leave anything behind, because there was a legend that this girl that was getting changed and she leaves something behind and she decides to go back to get it while she tells her friend to go out and hold the bus for her. So she goes back in the locker room to get this, whatever she left. And the guy there, he attacks her and ends up dying, and his body is still there. I know that sounds crazy, but that was that. So the actual story that's supposed to be the true incident about what happened in like 2001. And it was this girl who was supposed to be getting changed for PE or whatever, and she was running late and it was time to go for the day or whatever. So she got dressed and whatever and was going to leave. And as she was leaving the gym, she realized she left her purse. So she told her friend, to go hold the bus for her. She went back to get her purse. Her friend offered to go with her, and she told her, no, it's no big deal. Just go hold the bus. I'll be there in just a minute. So she goes in and she gets her purse. And while she's in the locker room, she hears like footsteps coming closer to the room or whatever. And then she gets scared and she starts to try to run away. And the next thing you know, somebody grabs her and they're like tearing her clothes and stuff. And they throw her to the ground and she's fighting them or whatever. During the struggle, somehow she ends up getting away from them and pulls this locker down on top of the person and ends up getting out of the school or whatever and runs out. The bus is already gone, but she ends up getting home and they report the incident or whatever. So the police go out and they inspect the scene. So they go out there and they go into the locker room or whatever and they find the pull down lockers, the girl's purse, and a pool of blood, but no body is to be found.
Well, that's not weird at all.
That's not weird at all.
Like many of these stories.
Right. So is this a ghost attacking these girls? I don't know. It kind of makes you wonder what the heck is going on. I mean, there's blood, so you would think it would be a person, but they found nothing. Nothing. So next in Anniston, Alabama is the Stringfellow Memorial Hospital. The founder of the hospital, Mary Stringfellow, was an old organ player. She used to play the organ or whatever. And the nurses say that if you're working the third shift, you can hear the organ begin playing in the chapel. But no one is in there if you go and look.
Not spooky at all.
Not spooky at all. And there's also another haunting in this story. There's a man who supposedly unalived himself in one of the rooms by, well, we won't say what he did. But anyway, he used a gun. And patients have said on numerous occasions that they can see the body of a headless man with blood on the wall in the corner of the room. So that's not off-putting either. So yeah, I don't really know that I'd be wanting to visit this hospital either. It doesn't seem like it'd be very restful, but those are two of the legends at the Stringfellow Memorial Hospital in Anniston. So next, we're going to Church Street Graveyard that is located in Mobile, Alabama. It opened in 1820, which makes it the city's oldest cemetery. So supposedly there's this big oak tree that grows there, this big live oak tree that's growing outside the wall. But this tree is special in that it's supposed to be connected to some hauntings. So as the story goes, a man by the name of Charles R.S. Boyington came to Mobile from Connecticut in 1833. And on May 11th, 1834, he was seen walking towards the Church Street graveyard with his friend, Nathaniel Frost. Later that day, Frost was found robbed and left for dead outside the cemetery, but Mr. Boyington was arrested while attempting to flee Mobile.
Well, I wonder what could have happened.
I wonder too. I mean, it's definitely a mystery. So on February 20th, 1835, he was hanged by the neck and buried in Church Street Graveyard. Prior to his hanging, he declared that a mighty oak would spring from his heart to prove his innocence. And an oak tree did eventually grow from his grave, and ever since then, there have been several reports of crying and whispering sounds coming from it, and it continues to be one of Alabama's most haunted tales. So apparently this oak tree sprung out of his heart to prove his innocence. So, I mean, I don't guess they ever had any proof. I mean, he was fleeing. I don't know. Maybe he just got scared. I don't know what happened. But anyway.
Something I've heard of people doing was actually having a seed, like a tree seed, whatever, in their pocket, a sapling.
Right. It could have. I mean, that could have been what happened. It could just have been a fluke. Just a total fluke that it grew there. I mean,
it's very well possible.
Right. Trees grow in weird places all the time, so who knows? But anyway, that is the story, and that's supposed to be why the tree is there. So if we head over to the Bankhead National Forest, there is the legend of Aunt Jenny Johnson. So this legend began in the 1860s, and basically there was this woman, Jenny Johnson, and her husband, and they had 10 children, and they ran a tavern and an inn. Her husband would give aid to like Union men and Confederate deserters who would hide, throughout the surrounding forests and hills. So the Home Guard Patrol comes up one day. They didn't know if they were there to draft their son for the war or to punish her husband for their, what they've been doing. So they lynched Jenny's husband to a tree while he was hanging there, their oldest son rushed up to stop their father's death, and he was shot by the Home Guard. They then hanged and shot his father and rode away on their horses. And legend has it that Jenny made all her children join in taking a blood oath with their father's blood, pledging not to rest until every one of the 8 members of the Home Guard that murdered her husband and oldest son were killed. It is said that she first shot the leader of the Home Guard and made a soup dish out of his skull.
Well, all right then.
And then she trained her children to shoot proficiently and set out in revenge. Her sons hunted down several of the men, but eventually all of her sons died of a bullet wound from seeking out their father's revenge. She had a wooden cane in which she cut a notch with every death of the posse member her sons brought back to her. 7 of the 8 men of the home guard were killed, and the last one disappeared when he got word that Jeannie and her sons were after his life. She died at the age of 98, outliving all but one of her children. On her deathbed, she told them how proud she was, and her sons had died like men.
Huh.
So yeah, she was not somebody to be messed with, it sounds like. I don't know that I blame her. I mean, it does sound like, kind of like she was, getting some justice here, because it does sound like they were not in the right. But yeah, she wasn't somebody to be messed with. If she made a soap dish out of one of them's skull, that's a ruthless woman.
Yep. I can respect that.
So if we head over to Gadsden, Alabama, we have the Hines Road Witch. And this is said to be haunted by the ghost of a woman who appears from the woods. And the story goes that there was this witch who lived in the woods that surrounded the road. And it says that if you're brave enough to walk along the road at night, the ghost witch will rush up to you screaming she sold her soul to the devil.
Well.
So, perfectly plausible thing to say to someone. If you're seeing someone running at night, run up to them. I sold my soul to the devil. Why not? So next, we head back to Birmingham, and we look at a statue called the Storyteller. And in this, it depicts like this ram that's holding a book and like a staff, and around him, there's like these other creatures, like other animals or whatever. And he's supposed to be reading like a story to them. Now, the woman who commissioned this actually commissioned this in remembrance of her son, and it's located at the 5 Points intersection. It's a fountain and whatever. And it's actually really pretty. But there's some that believe because the fountain storyteller is depicted as a ram, that it actually has satanic ties and pagan whatever because of the ram. I don't really know where that comes from, to be honest, with 100% certainty, but that is the belief, that it is some kind of satanic thing and it's cursed and whatever. But it's been there for years, and, but anyway.
Perfectly logical.
Perfectly logical, because it's a ram. It's got to be related to Satan and whatever. Why not? So next, if we head over to the Coosa River, which runs through eastern Alabama down towards central southern Alabama. And it's supposed to be the home of the river serpent, which is supposed to be this gigantic snake monster that, is not very nice, apparently. So there's been several reports of people seeing this monster. There was an article in 1993 in the Spartanburg Herald Journal. And according to the article, there was a man named Buck Sutton, and he was fishing in Van's Hole when he saw the creature writhing in the swampy shallows. He described the horrible sighting to his friends, only to turn up mysteriously dead a few days later. So they think that this is because of the serpent's curse. Now, there's been some other ones that have supposedly been victim to them, falling prey to the curse. One well-known one is Billy Burns. He died in 1827, and then Jim Woodham in 1829. No records exist as to the actual cause of these perplexing departures or why they died or whatever. Basically, it's supposed to be that if you see this snake, it's supposed to have some kind of curse thing on you, and it's supposed to curse you and you die soon. And this thing is supposed to be huge. It's supposed to be as long as 70 feet long. 70 feet long.
It's pretty big.
And some people think that it might be some kind of a dinosaur type thing or something, like got stuck in there, somehow swim up from the ocean some way. I don't know. Or just whatever. No pictures or anything exist of it. But anyway, I guess stay away from Coosa River in case you don't want to get the river serpent's curse.
I guess so. Might be a very smart idea.
Next, we'll head back to Birmingham, Alabama, and the Redmont Hotel. Now, this is Birmingham's oldest and most historic hotel, and not surprisingly, it has a pretty haunted past. So, there's been a few different sightings of a few different ghosts and even a small dog. So, one of the ghosts is supposed to be a woman in white who passed away in the hotel, and she's supposed to be seen on the 9th floor. So, if you stay on the 9th floor, you're supposed to see this woman in white. There's also the ghost of a former owner, Clifford Stiles, and he's said to walk the halls. And then, of course, there's the small dog. He's seen trotting around the hotel as well. But the most famous ghost is supposed to be that of the famous singer Hank Williams Sr., who had been seen in the room he stayed in right before his death. People have reported also strange occurrences such as doors opening, furniture or their baggage and luggage moving around. So, yeah, you can supposedly see the ghost of Hank Williams Sr. there. That
Well,
was
that's
supposed
interesting.
right. So he's supposed to stay there the night before he died, and people say that they still see him in that hotel. All right, staying in Birmingham, Alabama, we're going to check out the Tutwiler Hotel. So this is one that there was reporting in like 1995. There was this bartender who supposedly worked there, and every night he would turn the lights off in the bar, in the kitchen, or whatever. And for 5 nights in a row, every night he'd turn them off, and they just turn right back on by themselves. So on the sixth night, he goes to work and he's greeted by this multi course meal with candles and wine that no explanation of where it came from or what happened, why it's there. So there are people who believe that it was offered by the ghost of Colonel Tutwiler, for whom the hotel was named. Tutwiler is supposedly the ghost that haunts this hotel, and he's not supposed to be like a bad ghost or anything other than like turning the lights and stuff off. But he was going through a spell where he was actually kind of messy. So the bartender would leave at night, everything would be cleaned up, you come back in, there'd be a mess the next day. But he started to learn that if he would bid the colonel a good evening and kindly ask him not to leave a mess, when he came in the next day, everything would be as it was. So it's a respectful ghost anyway, and he follows the request. So he told him to quit making a mess, and he apparently listened.
Well, that's a nice change.
That's a nice
Friendly
change.
ghost.
Yep. Next, we're going to Northport, Alabama, to the Jemison Center or the Old Bryce Hospital. So this Northport Hospital is supposed to be a hot spot for those seeking a haunting experience. So it's a former insane asylum. So right off the bat there, got to be a hotbed for paranormal activity. So it has a reputation for treating its patients horribly and even venturing on what would be considered torture. So I guess that probably is why there's supposed to be so much going on, because the patients there were really treated badly. Visitors there, they claim to feel like hot and cold spots. They see items moving on their own and hear ghostly sounds and footsteps. Some even seem to tell of a doctor's coat traveling through the halls. People have heard screaming, scuffling of feet, and other unexplained creaking of doors have been reported. You can still I guess technically explore it, but police officers do go out there often, so it probably wouldn't be a good idea to head out there. Next, we're going to be talking about the Lucas Tavern. It's located in Montgomery, Alabama. So it's not really like anything really bad has happened here either. Basically, what it is supposed to be the Lucas Tavern was this tavern that was owned by this woman, Eliza Lucas, from 1820 to 1840, and it was supposed to be this like really upscale place for travelers to enjoy a clean bed, a safe place to stay. And she supposedly took a lot of joy in hosting her, the people who were traveling and whatever. And eventually it became a private home for her. And then, it went on for a while. And then in 1980, long after, of course, she had died, the tavern was restored to its former glory. And
Yay.
that's when the ghost of the friendly hostess began to visit its occupants. So, people say that they can see Eliza Lucas often, and she's described as a short woman dressed in a Victorian dress, waving kindly and smiling at passerbys in the doorway of the tavern. A favorite story of her occurred when she supposedly attended a community member meeting, her ghost. When one member became hostile and angry in his response to a controversial topic, she supposedly blasted a great puff of ash and smoke down on him to show him that his temper did not agree with her high standards for Southern manners. So, yeah, she didn't like his attitude, so she gave him some ash and smoke.
Yay.
Next, we're going to be talking about another tale that came from the 13 Alabama Ghosts in Jeffrey, and that's called Bill Skeeto's Hole, and it's located in Newton, Alabama. So, according to the story, Bill Skeeto is reported to haunt the Choctawhatchee River Bridge in Newton. Sorry. I tried to break that word up, and I knew what it was, and I sounded crazy. I apologize. But anyway, so during the Civil War, he was the victim of a lynching for reportedly hiring a substitute to fight for him through the war while he came home to take care of his sick wife. Although he denied this charge, he was hung from the bridge. But being that he was such a tall man, they had to dig a hole in the ground enough so his feet wouldn't hit the ground, basically. So now, to this day, there is a hole there that cannot be filled. People have tried to fill it up. They've put all kinds of dirt, debris, everything in it, and come back the next day, and it's neatly cleaned out, and the hole's still there.
Hmm.
So that hole cannot be filled up, and that's supposed to be where they hung him, dug that hole so that his feet would go down into the hole instead of hitting the ground. Because I don't know how tall he was, apparently very tall. So for any of those that like to go eat or dine with ghosts, you can go visit the most haunted restaurant in Alabama, and that is the Gaines Ridge Dinner Club located in Camden, Alabama. And it was named supposedly the most haunted restaurant in Alabama. It's a very popular restaurant located in an 1820s antebellum home and is well known for its family of ghosts. There's supposed to be several guests have reported hearing like screams, the aroma of pipe smoke when no one's smoking. They see a floating woman in the windows. They hear the cries of a baby, apparitions in the mirror of a tall bearded man in black. And the owners report that their experience with ghosts are known as ghost truths rather than ghost stories, because she says she has absolute conviction that this happened to her. That she even heard the mysterious screams of a coworker who denied calling out to her, even though they both heard the yelling. So they both heard somebody hollering for her, and neither one of them was doing it. So yeah, so if you want to go dine at the most haunted restaurant in Alabama, you sure can, in Camden, Alabama.
Spooky.
Next, we're going to move over to a little town called Lynn, Alabama, and the Highway 5 Ghost. So this stretch of road, for anybody who lives near it, and I actually don't live terribly far from this town, so I know for a fact that this is a stretch of road that's traveled by a lot of big trucks, semis, 18-wheelers, whatever you want to call them, diesels. There's a bunch on here. They do travel here a lot, and on Highway 13 there, which comes up to it. So basically what is supposed to have happened was there's the ghost of the woman who was killed by a trucker. And apparently she travels up and down the road searching for a killer and is reported to bang on truck doors in the midst of her searching. She supposedly steps up on the sides of trucks and peers inside the window to get a look at the driver. So there's a lot of truckers who will even just bypass this stretch of road entirely because they say it's really eerie at night and they just don't even want to deal with it. So many people who are from Alabama or surrounding areas know that Gulf Shores, Alabama is a vacation spot for many people who want to go to the beach, of course. It's a very beautiful place, got white beaches, it's gorgeous. But at Gulf Shores, there is something called Fort Morgan, and it's also become a pretty famous place where people will go visit. It's a Civil War fort or whatever. And what happened was supposedly that the fort took heavy fire throughout the bloody battle of the Mobile Bay, and it's rumored that if you go there, you can hear the cries and screams of men late into the night as I guess they are fighting for their lives. And then also you can see the ghost of a solitary woman who is searching for justice because she was killed in the fort. So yeah, I don't really know that I'd want to go somewhere and hearing people crying and dying or whatever, but that don't really sound like a vacation for me. But yeah,
It does not to me either.
if you're interested in that, you can definitely head out to Fort Morgan in Gulf Shores. Next, we're going to be talking about Jack Cole Road in Hayden, Alabama. And it's basically this little unpaved road that's surrounded by dense woods and wilderness off Highway 7 in Blount County. And since 1890, there have been 68 deaths that have been reported on this road. So 60 of the deaths were supposedly due to an outbreak of cholera in 1900. But the other 8 were supposedly all killed by murder.
Oh.
Don't really know exactly what the murder was, but supposedly 8 people were killed and 68 people have died on this road. People claim to see all kinds of weird things here. They see things like lights in the woods. They hear like loud sounds. They see people walk ghostly figures like walking along the road. And strangest of all, people have said to see something that looked like a deformed Bigfoot-like animal that looks to be half wolf and half man.
Well, that's
So
interesting.
that's very interesting. I didn't know that you could see that out there. But yeah, if you want to head to Hayden, Alabama, apparently you can see a Bigfoot, a werewolf, half man, some kind of creature. All right. Lastly, I'm going to be talking about the Ghost Bridge in Florence, Alabama. This bridge is the Jackson Ford Bridge, and the nickname, of course, is the Ghost Bridge. Just looking at it, I've seen pictures of it. Just looking at it, it does look spooky. It's a really spooky looking bridge. It's kind of dilapidated, it's decayed and whatever. And there are several rumors that swirl around this bridge. So some people say they see like a white mist that rises from the creek and lies atop the bridge. Other people have said they've seen like sightings of a strange orb of light, and they hear footsteps, and they see monster-like beings walking the bridge at night. So that's going to wrap us up for the Alabama Ghost for now. There are some more that I'm probably going to come back and cover later, but I didn't want to make it too long. So next week, we're going to be going back with a gentleman, and he is going to be talking about some Roman mythology. So we definitely want you to come back and check that out. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment and let us know where you're from. We'd love to cover some ghost stories from where you're from as well. So don't forget to stay disturbed.